A very special Sunday evening to everybody. Greetings, welcome, Aquaba. We hope that everybody is really doing as well as you can do on your highest levels of mental, physical, and spiritual health. We really sincerely hope that that is you today. And if you're not there, if you can get there as soon as possible, that would be wonderful. We're so glad that you have decided to join us for this 9/26/21 edition of our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Welcome again to everyone. Today we are going into chapter 2 of my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. We're going to break down chapter 2, the title of which is Africa and the African Diaspora. Very excited because we get to talk about Africa, which is something we love to do. And also because we're still in the beginning of the book. We haven't really gotten close to the meat of the book, which is really talking about on the ground organizing work. So looking forward to moving in that direction. I myself, taking from the book, had just a wonderful time yesterday out in the park here in California where I live. We are in the process of organizing a community defense project here. And in the park here, we had a training session based on the book. We started as the book encourages you to organize your work around a political education foundation. And so we read a wonderful article about Maroon communities, African indigenous communities that fought against colonialism 500 years ago, many that still exist to this day. In Brazil, they have the Quilombo communities, which are Maroon communities. So we read about that. The point being that the work that we're attempting to do is not something new. It's been around, because if you understand history, you know where you've come from, then you're going to have a better idea how to understand where you are and an even clearer idea how to proceed for the future. So community defense is not new. It's just a new name for it. But we had a great discussion about that. And then we engaged in some physical training. So wonderful. And I'm so happy that, this humble effort is that I made is being able to guide and direct so much positive work. So glad you all are here for that. Of course, we always start by acknowledging that this is indigenous people's land that we're on here in the Western Hemisphere, and they fight daily to get their land back. And we stand with them in complete, uncompromising solidarity in their quest to get their land back. There are no Americans except the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Everybody else calling themselves an American, whether it's hyphenated or whatever way you use American, you're an imposter. The only Americans here are the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the Indians, the natives, the Chicanos, the Latinos, the Mexicanos. Those are the indigenous people. If you're not that, you're not indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. I don't care how many YouTube videos you watch. So we give honor and respect to the indigenous people. And we, of course, also give honor and respect to our African ancestors. And those Africans claiming that they're not African, but can't even tell you how to properly spell Africa, not to mention anything about Africa. That's why this chapter of the book that we're going over today is so important, you all, because we are going to talk about Africa and what's happening in Africa. And that is not something that's talked about at all in this society. And it's so important to what happens in our lives here in the Western world, what happens in Africa. So that's what we're going to break down today. So glad you're here to join us. This week's edition of our Ancestors' Voices, Chapter 2 of A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, Africa and the African Diaspora. We will get started with our usual introductions for those that are here for the first time. Myself, I am Ahjamu, longtime organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Glad to meet you. Shukura is here with me, my only child, my daughter, who is also an organizer in the All African People's Revolutionary Party and who grew up in the APRP and is working to finish up her studies and become the first doctor on our side of the family here. So I'm excited about that and very proud of her, obviously, for her studies, but even more importantly, for the type of human being that she has become and the work that she is doing and the privilege I have in being able to work alongside her. You know, I see all the people, National Daughters Day or whatever it is. I'm not real clear on that, but and that's a beautiful thing. But you know, for the two of us, every day is National Daughters Day. You know, I'm fortunate to be the father of this human being. So, you know, I didn't post anything about her. I rarely put pictures of her up on social media because there's so many haters and attacks. You know, so yesterday, one of our party meetings, somebody tried to log in. It was a committee meeting that I'm not a part of for a meeting that I didn't log into. Someone tried to log in using my name for their Zoom identity. And then, you know, of course, people saw my name and let them in. And then they were disruptive. They didn't speak, but they did disruptive things to try to disrupt the meeting until they got put out. So, you know, we have a lot of that kind of stuff that happens, you all. So I don't put her picture up, but please don't let that make you become confused about how much I adore this human being and glad to be able to share this space with her every week. The objective of the APRP is Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa. That's our objective. That's the definition of Pan-Africanism. The book there, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, will give you our strategy that we work to fulfill every day to achieve that objective of Pan-Africanism. And I look at a guide as that is the addendum to the Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And we have chapters everywhere and relationships with other liberation movements. And we are fighting a genuine battle for revolutionary progress and human forward direction. So we're glad that you're here, and I will turn it over to Shukura to get us started talking about Chapter 2 of A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much, Daddy. I really appreciate that very warm and heartfelt introduction. We hope that you all are safe and well. I have been really looking forward to this particular chapter because I think it's so important for people to understand just how valuable they are if they identify as African, because we're not really taught that we have value. We're actually taught the opposite, that we should be ashamed of ourselves. We're taught that there's something wrong with us. And that goes for other people too. If you're poor, period, regardless of your color of skin, you're taught that there's something wrong with you and that you should have saved your money better or whatever nonsense they put out there. But for Africans in particular, along with our identity, along with our culture, along with our language, along with our way of life that was literally beaten out of us, we also lost our self-esteem in that. And so like there is evidence to support that, you know, the post-traumatic slave syndrome is a real thing in terms of understanding that we have space and that we belong on this planet just like everyone else. And more importantly, we don't belong in America. We do belong in Africa, but that gap has caused so much trauma in terms of how we view ourselves and how we now rebuild our identities as a people. So I was really excited to talk about today's chapter because I think it fills that gap in. I think it does an excellent job filling that gap in. You know, whether you've read the chapter or not, you have an idea that you bring something to the table because you already know that as an African person, you operate on a different level. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you come from ancestors who studied the sun rhythm and pattern and studied the scheduling based on the sun when it would go down and come up, and was able to develop this concept that we now call time based on the sundial. You also come from people who were doing calculations and statistical analyses before any mathematician or engineer from Germany ever had the idea of that. You come from people that understand that there are resources that come from Central, Southern, and other parts of Africa that we use today, that people in Miami use, that people in Jamaica use, that other people around the world use. And that's partly why the exploitation continues to take place. So I think it's important that we talk about today's chapter because a lot of us need a reality check to remind ourselves that not only do we matter, not only do we have a space, and most importantly, we have an objective to free Africa, because we need to be remembered that we bring something to the table. And a lot of that stems from us unlifting the veil of ignorance, if I can quote Booker T. Washington, and helping us to understand that we really need to do our own research on ourselves. And I don't mean our quote unquote selves living in America, because that is such a lie based on a limited framework anyway. I'm talking about from the moment you were born on African soil, and then your ancestors were kidnapped, and that lineage of you being born was now brought over on a slave ship. You need to go back and do your research. And part of that means reading and unpacking things. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you all about that today, because even if you don't identify as African, the exploitation of Africa still impacts you, regardless of your race, your class, your non-binary identity, or your gender. It impacts you tremendously, in addition to African people. So thank you all for joining us. And without further ado, the basic thesis of this chapter, A Guide for Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, is the premise that there was no disconnect, no separation, no isolation to anything any African experiences anywhere on earth from what any African experiences anywhere else. Our reality as a people is different than any other people because we have been literally scattered by force all over and across the globe. As a result, we have been forced to adapt to the political, economic, and social conditions of wherever we find ourselves. We do our absolute best to develop sustainable ways of life in whatever situations we find ourselves in. In fact, our ability to take nothing and create positive living circumstances in all corners of the planet Earth speaks to our consciousness and unconsciousness utilization of African culture as our conduit to balance us. For the African continent today, it's an area that has 1 billion inhabitants who have been viciously divided up into colonial legacy territories that are in no way designed, set up, or administered to serve the interests of the people living within them. For example, a country like Guinea in West Africa contains the largest supply of the world's bauxite, B-A-U-X-I-T-E. Bauxite reserves, which are used to make aluminum products. That comes from Guinea, y'all, aluminum products. That country has one of the highest percentages of rainfall in any other geographic area on the planet. Still in Guinea today, despite the mass bauxite wealth and ample rainfall, the country's 10 million people live in horrible poverty. That sounds familiar. So one of the most expensive resources comes from Guinea, but yet the people who live in Guinea suffer and live in poor, deplorable conditions. We know something about that. Poverty, while Kaiser Aluminum, a major organization, or Alcoa Aluminum, stay on top of the stock market from their ability to do what? Steal and take from Guinea's resources and exploit Guinea's bauxite. And Guinea, despite its rainfall, has some of the most unreliable electricity in Africa, in a country where, due to that rainfall, electricity and hydroelectric power should never be an issue. We can provide the same example of all of Africa, but the point is Africa is rich. But those riches are stolen daily from Africa's ability to utilize them to address its problems. The chapter also mentions cobalt or coltan. It talks about how different resources that come from Africa, different minerals, are used to drive devices, from the powder itself being grained from an electrical current. So the device I'm using to talk to you, but also to power engines and cars, to help build furniture and different things like that. And so when we think about this, we have to continue to remember this is not what we're going to learn when we go to 5th grade US history. It's also not when we're going to learn when we go to 6th grade world history. Okay, we're really going to have to pick up these books and read ourselves, you all. And this book particular is $8 for you to literally dive in and learn yourself. And you're not going to know everything there is to know after you read this book, no, but it's a step in the right direction. And so if you feel lost, if you feel displaced, if you feel like something is off or something is not right, that's probably because you need to fulfill something greater than what the CNN and the CIA are feeding into your head every day. It also means that you probably have come to realize that you can't trust them, which means you now need a new source of where you find your information. So what better source than to pick up a book that was actually written with integrity and is written with sustainable facts that can be supported based on our comrades, such as Nkrumah or Sekou Touré and other members who not only lived in Africa, but helped to manage how those resources were being disseminated. If you are a part of Work Study and you read Ghana by Kwame Nkrumah, then you know he was instrumental in how the cacao was used in terms of not only benefiting the farmers who were growing cacao, but how Ghana could then turn around and use the cacao's resources and profit to put it back into the country's welfare and sustainability. So that's just one example of how we follow Nkrumah, we follow Touré for purposes beyond measure, because not only did they live in the continent, so they understood what this country needs were throughout the continent, but they also were able to travel around the world and pick up different ideas from other comrades that we follow so that we could help make Africa be free and not be under colonist power. I know you all heard me talk earlier when we started this slide about how Africa was divided. Well, that took place at the Berlin Conference. So we know that to this day, there are some Europeans who still think that they own parts of Africa. That's problematic. Because if they believe that, then that means they're going over there and literally stealing, raping, and taking whatever they want, whenever they want, making profit off of it. Meanwhile, the people who live in the country where the resource is being produced, who should greatly benefit from a community defense standpoint, because the community could organize together to help everybody benefit. Instead, those people are suffering and living in deplorable conditions. Meanwhile, companies such as Alcoa Aluminum are with more money than they know what to do with. These are serious, serious problems, you all. Serious, serious problems. And we need to unpack that. It's not really a choice that we can just stand by and do nothing, because if we do that, then we're bystanders. And most importantly, that means we're giving permission for Europe to disrespect us. And we can't allow that to happen. On a global issue here in Memphis, we can't allow it to happen. In Guinea, we can't allow it to happen. We cannot allow it anywhere. This is why Pan-Africanism is so important, because as Malcolm has said, and as others have said, if it's happening to one of us in Guinea or in Miami, the problem is it's happening to us everywhere. That's the problem. And so we can't be individualistic and just think about Africans who are being beat down by the police in America. We have to consider that Africans are being beat down by the police in other parts of the world. We have to consider that. It's not up for discussion, because police are being trained from a united standpoint. So they're training and treating us the same everywhere, not just in the US. So if that's one problem, then we can imagine that there's other problems out there that help connect us. And again, that's the thing, is we're all connected. It doesn't matter where you were born, you are African. And as Nkrumah said, that means you belong to the African nation. So we have to remember that and just keep that in mind as our frame of how we move forward. And so just in closing out this slide, I also just want to talk about, who is it that is exploiting Africa? Who's using these resources? Capitalism. That's an easy answer. I told my comrade in Work Study the other day, whenever you're trying to figure out a problem, it's pretty much always capitalism. Even something as simple as making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you don't have one of the ingredients, you have bread and jelly, but no peanut butter, or you have bread, but no peanut butter or jelly. That's related to capitalism. Because 9 times out of 10, whatever your income situation is, you couldn't go to the grocery store, maybe because you didn't have a car, maybe because the grocery store had a mass shooter come in and shoot up the grocery store. Like, there's all these different reasons, but the point is you don't have what you need, which is a direct relationship to the system and how it has exploited you and not seen you as a valued person who deserves nutrients from a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and instead taking on that you should just starve because the system doesn't have to care about you. But if you work at the grocery store, they don't have no problem laboring you to death and you dying from working. No, they don't have a problem with that. But you can't even go to the grocery store and spend $2 on a piece of loaf of bread and get some peanut butter and jelly. Problematic. So whenever you have issues just related to capitalism, I guarantee you it's got its foot in the door somewhere, shape, or form. So the capitalist system, And so we're thinking about that. Meanwhile, in the African diaspora, African people are despised, disrespected, and systematically oppressed, not because of our skin color, not because we can dance, but because the capitalist system in every country on earth is dependent on this exploitation, okay, on this exploitation of the African model. And that's how the capitalist system sustains its dominance so clearly. These countries are not going to risk having large populations of African people running around, people who represent, just by their very existence, the greatest threat to the security of these countries. Next slide. These contradictions expressed in the previous slide are so overwhelmingly obvious that it is a case of hiding in plain sight. As the book illustrates on page 21 of chapter 2, Hollywood even makes movies that demonstrate the exploitive example against the African masses in mass motion pictures like Sean Penn's, quote, "The Gunman," end quote. Yet because of how capitalism propaganda works, people can even see movies like that one, and even through the contradictions is made plain in the script, most people who see that movie won't make the real life connection to how that movie displays the evil of capitalism exploitation of the African continent. The same is true for Africans within the US. As the book argues, every reason under the sun for why Africans in the US suffer is provided except for the actual reason. It is often said that the problem is that people don't like our Blackness, even though every person has something to do with their physical and financial ability to darken their skin, kink their hair, grow their lips, dance the way we dance. These are all examples of how we ourselves are not happy with ourselves, but yet our culture has continued to be adopted, continued to be recycled, continued to be manifested, continued to be exploited by other people, left and right. Talk the way we do, so on and so forth. So with those examples being said, then it is also said that our problem is that we don't work hard enough and we don't know how to support each other. These things are commonly said when we cannot name one other person who has worked to free this country in the 310 years collectively. The African masses within the US are stuck. We are stuck because we don't belong here in this country, and we have been purposely denied any knowledge or desire to learn about the place where we should be proud of. As a result, the book argues that we languish here, being expected to be the most loyal inhabitants of this society, when we are some of the people who give the most and receive the least. Thank you, you all, and let's stay vigilant and join an organization working for justice.
Thank you for that foundation as usual. And I'm just going to continue on and highlight points that I heard you bring into play. And the way I want to do that, you all, is by talking about some of the realities and some of the myths. Because when we talk about Africa in particular, most of what is known in the Western world is based on myth. It's based on things that are not true. It's based on innuendo and misinformation. So we want to just use several examples to illustrate how that is the case. Okay, and the first one is, this concept that Africa is full of SHIT whole countries. And, I know that Trump said that, and a lot of people, they want to put that on him. But what he was saying, in truth, is what a lot of people think. Even a lot of people who disagree 100% with him, you still have some level of that consciousness in your mind. And the way that we know that that's true is because if you have not consciously studied African history, then the only alternative is that you're left with the propaganda that is being emanated to us 24/7, 365 days a year about Africa. And that is the same type of information that fueled that idiot to make that statement. The people there are savage. They don't know how to engage in civilization. All they do is kill each other. They're lazy. They're relying on the Western world or else they would starve and die. Wars, poverty. That's people's image of Africa. If you have not engaged in a systemic process to study Africa, if you haven't done that, and you know if you have or not, then I'm saying that if you have not done that, some part of what I just described is a part of how you see Africa. Whether you're conscious of it in your conscious mind or not, it's still true. There's no other way around that, because there's no way you can have a positive reinforcement about something that all you've received is negative information about. There's just no way. I don't care how good a person you think you are, you're human, and that's how humans function. You're going to be influenced by the information that's made available to you. So this is a myth, obviously, that that's all Africa represents. And Shukura gave a couple of really good examples to illustrate the reasons why Africa is poor. It has nothing to do with the lack of effort from the people who live there. You try taking 100 million people from any country and see what the impact of that is on that country or that land base. You try that and see what the impact is. That's a conservative estimate of the number of people lost in the transatlantic slave trade, either from people who never made it to the Western Hemisphere because they decided their dignity was important and they jumped into the Atlantic Ocean. They fought and were killed and were left in the Atlantic Ocean, or whatever. They fought and took over the slave ship. The slave ship sunk, and they're at the bottom. They were at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean before they disintegrated. You have to say that because these clowns out here today, where there's no evidence of slave ships. Ships disintegrate, fool. I mean, this is, it gives you an ice cream headache how much ignorance is so prevalent in this society. Like it's unreal how prevalent it is. So none of these things are true as it relates to Africa. And especially if you look at, the picture on the left on the screen there. Just want to take a look at that picture. If you look at it, I don't know if you know what you're looking at, but for people who are familiar with African society, that's a bus depot, which, if people have traveled, you should be familiar with that scene, because you can find the same scene in Central, South America, the Caribbean, Asia as well. And all throughout Africa, you have these bus depots, and you go to these places to, go get on the bus and go to another city or whatever. It's public transportation. And so the amazing thing about that, the amount of time I've spent in Africa is you could go to any city. I don't care where you go. You can go to Johannesburg, you can go to Harare, Dar es Salaam, Accra, Dakar, Banjul, Addis Ababa. It doesn't matter, Mogadishu, wherever you go. And if you go to one of these bus depots at 5 o'clock in the morning, what you will see there are thousands of people, like you see in the picture, with goods, with things that they've stayed up all night, not getting any sleep to prepare, so that they can get on these buses and go to wherever it is they're going to go to try to sell those goods to make money to make it through the day. This is not the makings of a lazy person that goes through this. Most of these people here in this country, you told them they had to get up, they had to stay up all night and prepare what they were going to earn a living off of, and then go to the bus stop at 6 a.m. and then ride a bus for 8 hours, sell the stuff all day, then ride the bus back and have about 2 hours to sleep every night, every day. They wouldn't do it. As entitled and spoiled as these people are here, there's no way they would do it. So nobody in this society ever should be talking about effort and decisions that people make. Nobody here is qualified to talk about that. And then the other myth is, this comes from this statement that was made by that ignorant Barack Obama when he was president of this empire. And he said, colonialism is no longer a viable excuse for Africa. Well, I know he's not a stupid man. So the fact that he said that indicates to us that he was saying that as a tactical way to advance a political agenda, because we know he must know what Shukura talked about, that the same colonization that came out of the Berlin Conference, that gave Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, all of these, Portugal, all of these European countries control over Africa is the same system that once they gained control through that process, they were able to set up economic mechanisms to control the economy of the world. And those mechanisms that were established in the 1500s are still dominant and operational today, as Shakur gave you with the example of bauxite in Guinea. How can you explain how Guinea is one of the third or fourth poorest countries in the world, but yet they have the highest bauxite reserves of any country in the world, where electricity is more off than it is on there, where the people in the colleges, in the universities there have to go to the airport at night and sit out in the airport parking lot all night, because that's the only place in the entire country that has consistently working lights, so they can study under the lights in the airport outside, in a country that has some of the leading rainfall in the world. Now, if you know anything about electricity, you know electricity is produced from hydroelectric power, which that's why you build dams to harness the rainfall to transfer it into electricity, hydroelectric power. So there's no logical reason why a country that produces so much rainfall would never have electricity. The only rational explanation for that is the colonial system. And this is a problem in Guinea today, 2021. And that colonial system has been set up for centuries. So this statement by Barack Obama is an absolutely idiotic statement. It's a statement made by someone whose only concern and interest is in representing, as a spokesperson, the aspirations of the international capitalist and imperialist system. And so when you know that and you can articulate that the way we just did, you're never going to be confused just because this clown looks the same way we do. You know that no matter how he looks, there's no way in hell he can represent the same interest that we represent. And then another myth, Africa's tribalism is the reason for all the challenges on the continent. So with this, is important, as Kwame Nkrumah explained to us, that you have to understand the difference between tribes and tribalism. Tribes are a positive thing. The fact that people have different ways of doing things, speak different languages, different customs, these are things that once we come together, it makes us more dynamic. It makes it more interesting. It makes it more creative. It makes it more productive. So these are positive things. So we would never be against tribes. We would never be against ethnic groups. But tribalism is different, because now what you're talking about is where we elevate the way we do things over people who do things differently, and to the point where we will engage in conflict with people if they do things differently than we do. So it's amazing that here in the United States of America, which is the world's best example of tribalism, you know, the nationalism in this country is so primitive. It's the absolute manifestation of tribalism. And so it's phenomenal that people here think they can talk about, oh, those primitive tribes. The most primitive tribe in the world lives in this backward country here. So African tribes are not the problem. And even African tribalism, you show us a case of African tribalism, of which there are many in Africa, and we can point you right back to how colonialism exacerbated whatever conflicts exist between those tribes. We can show you that, and you can do, well, Sudan. Well, if you tell us Sudan, we can show you how the people in Sudan, the ethnic groups in Sudan, the Ndele groups, they have been able to live productively and in healthy ways with each other for thousands of years. And then now all of a sudden, here come all of these economic interests, France looking for the oil in Sudan, and all of these colonial interests. Now all of a sudden the ethnic groups can't get along with each other. We got a problem between Christianity and Islam. That's what they want you to believe. And so to the point where the country had to split up. And now there's a Sudan and a South Sudan. This was 100% exacerbated by colonialism. Rwanda. Well, the Hutus and the Tutsis, you know, people see Don Cheadle. I love Don Cheadle. He's a great actor. but you see Don Cheadle in Hotel Rwanda, excuse me, and that's the extent of your research and understanding of the history of Rwanda, is that Hollywood movie. And that's why there's so much confusion. Because if you even study lightly the history of Rwanda, you know that the Hutus and the Tutsis, you know that the Hutus are 90% of the population there, the Tutsis are 9%, the Twa are 1%, or the Twa, who the racist white supremacy calls pygmies, are 1%. And so you know that these three ethnic groups have existed peacefully, again, just like Sudan, for thousands of years. And it was not until the French came into Rwanda and began to uplift the Hutus, and the Belgians came into Rwanda and began to uplift the Tutsis and pitted these two ethnic groups against one another. And as the French gained dominance, or I'm sorry, as the Belgium gained dominance in Rwanda, put the 9% Tutsis on top of the society, so that if you were 90% Hutu, you couldn't own land, you couldn't own cattle. In Africa, owning cattle is like owning property and houses here. It's a sign of, it's a sign of privilege and wealth. You couldn't get educated in the schools, and this created the resentment that created the conflict in 1994 that silly movie was based on. So it's not a problem of tribes in Africa, you all. It's a problem of capitalism, colonialism in Africa. That's the problem. And then, it's necessary that we always maintain a class-based analysis of Africa. And this is what the book is, arguing for in its chapter 2, that we have to understand that there are interests in Africa that do not represent the masses of African people, even if they look like the masses of African people. This is true. I had someone yesterday ask me, well, with the situation going, the deplorable, disgraceful situation with our African family members from Haiti, what's happening to them, this person asked, well, why doesn't some African country volunteer to step up and have them come there? And I had to explain to them, that we don't control, our people don't control any of these countries in Africa. They're all controlled by neo-colonialism, that even though the presidents are quote unquote Black, they serve the interests of international capitalism and imperialism. So even if they wanted to, their masters wouldn't let them do something like that. They wouldn't let them do that, because then now you got to talk about how to, since the only reason why these countries were created in Africa was to facilitate wealth and revenue transfer to European colonial countries. You bring millions of people in there, that's going to impact that. So they don't want to have that happen. So this is what people don't understand. Like, they think, well, because there's a quote unquote Black president in Africa, then that must mean that we have agency in our political and economic destiny. No, these people serve the interests of this same system, just like Barack Obama. That's why, most people, if you study history, like you shouldn't have been excited about Barack Obama. There have been quote unquote Black presidents around the world for decades. You had the Duvaliers in Haiti, they were nothing but lapdogs for capitalism and imperialism. So how the hell you get Mobutu in the Congo, and so on and so forth, all the way to Museveni, Kagame, they're all over, Otto, they're all over the place. So that's why, this study thing is so important, because you won't be able to confuse us with this nonsense. Well, we got to get a Black president. I need a whole lot more than just you looking like me for me to decide that you're somebody that I'm gonna throw my lot in with. I need a whole lot more than that. I don't know nothing about you based on how you look. You could be the epitome of the devil and look just like my twin brother. That means nothing that you look like me. I got to know what your political and economic interests are and what you're working towards. That's what defines that. So that's why that's so important. And that's what the, chapter 2 is bringing out. And then also that, imperialism always works to sabotage Africa. The interesting thing about imperialism, you all, is that they always tell you, well, this is bad. Socialism is bad. They always tell you that socialism is bad. It's bad, it's bad, it's bad. It's bad, it's terrible, it's bad. Well, if it's so bad, then let the people who are practicing it carry it out. And then you will have an example for the whole world that, look, they did it, they tried it, they had every opportunity to make it work, and it didn't. You would have every opportunity to demonstrate that to people. So obviously you have concerns about their ability to succeed because you have to impose an economic blockade against Cuba to prevent them from building socialism. You have to destroy the Libyan Jamahiriya in Libya to prevent them from building socialism. You have to go to war against Vietnam to stop them from building socialism. So clearly you don't believe, even though that's what you're telling us, you really don't believe that socialism will fail no matter what, because if you really believe that, you would leave it alone. It's the equivalent of you saying, well, this person is evil, they're bad, I don't want anything to do with them, and then you just kidnap them and beat the hell out of them, hold them hostage, and you're saying, why are you doing that? Well, because they're bad and they're evil. Well, what did they do? Well, I'm not going to give them a chance to do anything. I'm just going to hold them hostage. Well, then you're the one that's the criminal. It has nothing to do with them. You're the criminal. So this is what you have to understand about imperialism. The whole reason why imperialism exists. I'm not going to define imperialism for you. You should get the book. It's defined in there. The whole reason why it exists is because it's a system that ensures that the capitalist centers can rely on resources from wherever those resources come from around the world to advance and uphold their capitalist dominance of the entire planet. So talking about Africans that live in the US, here are some truths and myths. And this is, again, what the chapter is tackling, right? So, of course, as we always say, the myth that they tell us is that this country is founded on principles of freedom and democracy. And the whole thing around this, like they're calling it critical race theory. You've heard of this, these debates around the country. And one of the, I think it was, I don't know, I don't follow these people because I'm not into, I don't deal with these electoral politics. But this white woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever, this insane woman said something the other day about there's no critical race theory taught in schools. Well, that's the one thing this idiot said that's correct, because critical race theory, whatever the hell that's supposed to be, is a course theory that's taught in law schools. It's never taught. It's never been a curriculum in K through 12 schools. And these people know this, or even if they don't know it, they're just too stupid to investigate it. But yet they have created this national debate about something that's not even taught in schools. They created a national debate about it being taught when it's never been taught. And a lot of you, well-intentioned, but equally confused, well, I think critical race theory should be taught. Well, then the minute you say that, even though you think you're taking a positive position, what's really happening is you're being sucked into somebody else's talking points, because you don't even understand, like it's not, there hasn't even been a debate. It hasn't been taught. What we're talking about here is the foundation of what this country is told to us to represent is a lie. That's it. It's not about what's taught in law schools across the country. This foundation of the education in this society is a damn lie. Everything about it is a lie. To the front end, to the back end, it's a lie. This country was founded on violence, theft, and murder, period. That's it. That's the discussion. And that's really what they don't want people talking about. That's really what they don't want the children to learn. That's really what's behind this. So if you're thinking for yourself instead of just reacting to stimuli, as Kwame Ture says, then you wouldn't even, like, people ask me all the time, what do you think about critical race theory? I tell them, I don't think anything about it. I think that this society was founded on theft, murder, and violence. That's what I think. I'm not going to be sucked into nobody else's talking points. We got our own talking points. We don't need anybody else's. So if you're not approaching these conversations that kind of way, well, I think critical race theory is, then all you're doing is just being sucked into somebody else's program, even though you think you're being articulate and you're really talking about something you're not, because that's not even the point. The whole point of bringing that up is to sidetrack you, get you talking about whether some curriculum in law school should be taught in school, and the real truth that this country was founded on theft, murder, and violence never comes up. You're not even talking about that anymore. And that's their whole idea. So, you know, it's important to understand that, you all, because I see it every day. People get sucked, good people get sucked into that. And that's what they do. And then another myth is that everybody in the US is basically operating from the same starting point. And I say this a lot. So I don't care, you know, even the most progressive Europeans in this country, I would argue 99.9% of them still believe that their lives are just as hard, if not harder, than any colonized person of color. I don't care how much they say that they know white supremacy is a problem. They still believe when something bad happens to their lives, they believe that their life is just, they don't say when bad things happen to them, well, you know, we still benefit from white supremacy. They don't say that. I don't see anybody saying that. What I hear people talking about is trying to, you know, make some sort of rationalization to justify why they believe that their life is just as hard, if not harder. And that's just the entitlement here. That's irrefutable. And just like every man believes that their life is anti-patriarchal as we as men try to be, at the core of it, 99.9% still believe that our lives are just as hard, if not harder, than women and marginalized genders. And that's what we have to attack. You know, everybody's not starting from the same point. This game is rigged. This field is slanted. And so if you understand nation, class, gender politics, you understand how it's slanted, and that the erosion is that colonized people are at the bottom and there's a class element. So you have petty bourgeoisie colonized people, you have working class colonized people, you have peasant colonized people, and there's a hierarchy. And, you know, you have to understand all of that to understand how people, like, you know, you can tell when people are confused. Well, homeless white people, they don't have any privilege. What? Shut up. Shut up. I mean, this is kindergarten stuff, you all, but yet this is the conversations people want to have. And this is why we're in the situation that we're in right now. I don't have any white privilege because I'm poor. You know, you can take any European, I don't care what class they are, and the analysis is that you line them up against an African or indigenous person in their same class. And in no category does the African and indigenous person come out better than the European. In working class people, no category. Healthcare, income, nothing do African and indigenous people come out ahead of Europeans. In the petty bourgeoisie category, that's true. In any other category, even in the lumpen proletariat, the criminal category, that's true. Because our people get accused of committing a crime, a European gets accused of committing the same crime, who's going to go to prison? Who's more likely to get convicted? And who's going to get a longer prison sentence? It's going to be us. So stop all this nonsense. Well, I'm white and I'm poor, so I don't have any, like, we don't start from the same starting point. That's a myth. And then again, you know, we constantly hit on this concept that we're Americans, convincing us that we are a part of this country somehow, and that our primary fight is fighting to be an accepted part of this country. Look, I'm telling you right now, every European person listening to this, and you tell your families and your friends and everybody you know, I don't give a good goddamn whether you accept me or like me or not. I don't need you. I don't care what you think about me. I don't need you at all. And the reason why I don't need you is because I know who I am. I am an African fighting against this backward system. And if you want to stand shoulder to shoulder with me and fight with me, then let's go to war together. But if you want to sit here and think that somehow my existence is tied to some kind of validation against you, you can go straight to hell with that. We don't need you. We're not here waiting on you to do anything. We are moving forward for our justice and forward human progress. And I would tell you if you're African or indigenous or Asian, that the minute you adopt that type of mentality and you begin to institutionalize that in yourself, your life will become a lot more productive and a lot easier. I'm telling you that right now. So understand that. You couldn't, there's not enough money in the world to make me want to be an American. I don't want anything to do with that. The other day I had on my African in America with the 3K shirt. Every time I wear it, somebody got something to say. That's why I wear it, because it generates conversations. And so the guy says, well, can I just, his approach was appropriate. Otherwise he would have got cussed out, but he was very appropriate. And I want to have conversations. So, as long as people approach me respectfully, I'm going to have conversations. So he approaches me and he says, I just want to know, like, would you want to stay here if that's how you feel? And I'm like, dude, this country has stolen from our people for 500 years. The only reason why I'm here is to get some of it back. Whether that's through educating our people to organize against this system, whatever way it is, to get it back. That's the only reason why I'm here. I'm not here because I have any desire to function and exist in this society. I could have done so much better. I do fine economically, very well, but I could have done so much better, but I'm not a kiss ass. I don't kiss people's ass. I don't do that. If people deal with me in respectful ways, I deal with them in respectful ways. I don't care if it's my boss. I don't give a damn. If they disrespect me, I'm gonna disrespect them. That's always how I've been. And it's made my life wonderful. So, but the thing is, if you function like that, you're not gonna be advancing in this system. That's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen for you. You're gonna always have people hating on you. You're gonna be doing a ton of good work and people are gonna ignore it. They're not gonna ever give you credit. That's just the life. And I don't care, because I'm not doing what I do for those things. I'm doing it because I want us to be free. So we are not Americans. We never have been. We never will be. That, you all, is a myth. And so to synthesize all of these things, to summarize what we're talking about here, African people, no matter where we are born or where we're living, the truth is we're Africans and we belong to the African nation. Someone said to me, well, I don't think you should call white people Europeans because they came to this hemisphere voluntarily, so they gave that up. And I told them, but it's not just about them. It's not their decision. This is someone else's land. That's why we call them Europeans. It has nothing to do with us trying to give them their identity. We call them Europeans because the reason they're here is because their ancestors colonized this land and stole it from the indigenous people. So us calling them Europeans is a way to highlight that point. Nothing else. We're not trying to, that's their responsibility to identify themselves. So by the same token, our reality is different because of how we got here. We didn't come here voluntarily. We didn't come here to be a part of this society, to make a better life for us. That's not why we're here. And any African that thinks it is just confused and doesn't understand his period. That's it. We are here because of trauma, devastation, and the African Holocaust. So I don't know how all of that makes us Americans. We're Africans living in this hellhole where people ask me, what's your identity? I'm an African living on the bottom of the slave ship. That's what I am, 2021. That's what I am, fighting to get free. So that's a reality, it's irrefutable. And as Kwame Nkrumah told us, our differences far outweigh our commonalities. That's a quote you can find in that handbook of revolutionary warfare that we showed you at the beginning. Our differences far outweigh our differences are far outweighed by our commonalities. So in other words, yeah, we speak different languages, we have this, we have that, but our history and culture is the same no matter where we are on earth. And that's the most important thing, because what language we speak is not going to liberate us. What food we eat is not going to liberate us. The way we practice our religion has not demonstrated that that's going to liberate us, you all. But us understanding our culture and our history and uniting and using those tools for unity and to forge our strength to fight, that will liberate us. So that's important to understand. African identity is always about where we're going. It's not about where we're from. Like people say, well, I'm of African descent. We should be saying I'm of African ascent, because it's about where we're going. When we call you an African, we're talking about that your future is tied to Africa's future. We're not just talking about, oh, you did a DNA test and paid some European corporation to tell you that you're from Ghana. I could have told you that for free. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about where we're going as a people. And if you understand that politically, you know, we're not just talking about whether you physically go to Africa or not. Yeah, hopefully you can go. You should go. You should want to go. But that's not the point. The point is your future is tied to the future of Africa. And if you don't understand it, all you have to do is study the life of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, because this was a man who did as much for Africa as anybody living or dead, who built an entire movement around Pan-Africanism 100 years ago. And this man never physically set foot in Africa. And it doesn't matter one bit. There's no question. Yeah, he was born in Jamaica. Yeah, he lived in the US, but that man was an African. No question about that. There's no confusion there. So if you don't understand that, study the life of Marcus Garvey. And hopefully that can help clear that up when we say that. And, you know, there's no logical argument against Pan-Africanism. And we know we're going to achieve it. We don't need you to believe it. If you don't believe it, that's your problem. You know, we'll see you when we get there. Like a lot of these Africans, for example, well, I don't think we'll ever accuse that, but we already know the minute we have Pan-Africanism, they'll be pushing me out of the line at the airport to get to Africa. The ones who, the hardest anti-Africans, because the only reason why they're anti-Africa is because they're trying to make some money. So once Africa is free, then now their vision will shift and they'll understand, okay, well, the money now is in Africa. So then now all of a sudden, they'll be the biggest Africans. But our people won't be confused by that nonsense. But these are the points that the chapter is bringing out, that we are one people and we are the ones who define our legacy. We are the ones that define our history, and we are the ones that define our future. And we are responsible to fight for our future. And that's what chapter 2 is designed to bring out. The message is that we have to unleash the African inside of us struggling to be free. That's what we have to do, you all. We cannot be confused into thinking that we're Americans or Canadians or any of this nonsense. We are Africans fighting for our freedom. And that was the general framework of that chapter. And like I said, these chapters, the first 3 actually, are really introducing the concepts around this community defense. And then the bulk of the book, chapters 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, are the step-by-step actions we take to organize in communities. So we can't wait to get to the core of the book, but we appreciate you for joining us for these introductory chapters. Next week on Our Ancestors' Voices, the October 3rd edition, same time, same places. We're going to be talking about chapter 3, a case for organizing Africans and everybody else against the capitalist system. We're going to be talking about why capitalism is not a good thing. Concretely, what is capitalism doing that's not good for us, you know, as humanity? So join in, tell some people and join us. Go to aprp-intl.org, join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. If you're African, you should do that today. I don't know what you're waiting on, but go ahead and do it. It's a good thing. Go to abetterworld.me. Please donate. I mean, people keep asking me, are these sessions taped? It's like we say it every week. People that come in here all the time, like, are these sessions taped? So say it again, keep saying it. Every event, you can go to abetterworld.me and it's on there. You just click on the video tab. Almost 90 weeks that we've done this, 90. Each of these episodes is up there. So go check it out. I'm an editor for the Hood Communist Collective, hoodcommunist.org. Check that out. New articles this week. We have new writings every week. We do a Telegram show. We had a wonderful session this last Thursday. And And you should come every other Thursday. We have them. Download Telegram. It's a free app on your phone, your smartphone, and you can get that and participate in it. We talked about AFRICOM. We talked about drone warfare last Thursday. So very good. And then we have all of these APRP broadcasts at the bottom of the screen. Pantula broadcasts, our comrades on the East Coast of the plantation. Revolutionary African Women, our comrades in the southern part of California. The Forward Ever broadcast on Spotify, and then our New Mexico state chapter comrades, the weekly newscast Thursdays at 12 noon Mountain Time. You should be tuning into all of those and letting people know. Support independent, revolutionary African analysis and organization. To hell with this support Black business. Support revolutionary African, independent African revolutionary organizations and analysis. That's where we need the support. That's what we need. And continue buying the book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. As I said, working on a project here in Sacramento where I live. We had a wonderful time last night where we were giving folks a sample, going through some self-defense moves, and it was dark and people didn't want to leave, and I had all the equipment set up, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to see to break this stuff down here. We got to stay. Like, can we just do it another 5 minutes? People really enjoying, the opportunity to get organized. We had a great time out there last night, and we look forward to the next one. So if you want to do something like that where you live, reach out, abetterworld.me. We would love to help you do that. That's the reason why the book was written, and that's the reason why we do what we do. So Forward Ever, everybody, have a great rest of your evening. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Stay strong. We live for one unified socialist Africa. The Americas belong to, as Sister Andrea Carmen, who is was on the executive board of the American Indian Movement. She used to say, U.S. out of North America. The Americas belong to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Capitalism has got to go. You already know. Patriarchy, evil. Homophobia, evil. One unified socialist Africa. Everybody have a great rest of your Sunday evening. We'll see you next week.